Test, 1, 2, 3. You talk now.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
You'll need to talk close to it. It'll pick it up. You can just talk normally.
Oh, okay.
Here, let's see. Alright, we're recording. So, today is February 18th, 2020, and I'm joined by my lovely grandmother, Esther Silberman. How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be with you as always.
Thank you. I'm down here in Florida, and I figured this would be a great thing for me to record you and just hear what you have to say.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So how old are you?
Oh, it's a lot of numbers.
That's okay.
84.
84. When were you born? What year?
1935.
1935. What was the world like in 1935?
Well, when I was little, you wouldn't know what the world was like, but it was right after the Depression. People were struggling, and it was probably a difficult time. I was born into a family that was struggling. Let's see, my father was out of work.
Who was your father?
I never really knew him. I only met him once in my life. Actually, I only met him once.
One time.
And I was about 5 years old.
How did you meet your father?
He and his new wife came to the foster family I was living with, and he said they were moving to California and that he would send for me. That was when I was 5. I'm still waiting.
For him to send for you.
Right, it never happened. So that was the only time I ever saw my father that I was aware of.
Did you ever meet your mother?
No.
No.
I was an infant when I was taken into foster care, so I really don't remember my biological parents at all. My mother was hospitalized with postpartum depression. After I was born, I was number 4 of the children.
Did you ever meet your biological brothers and sisters?
I did. I met my brother. I vaguely remembered because we were all in a foster home together at one point, and apparently what happened was kind of an interesting story. I was just an infant, and these other 3 kids were running around, and nobody was taking care of them because whoever my father had gotten to take care of the kids wasn't getting along with the older ones and took off, and we were alone. So the neighbors reported that we were abandoned children. So the authorities came and put us into foster care. That was how it happened.
And you were just an infant at that moment.
Right. I was the youngest and an infant, and so I don't remember any of it. The stories I got were from my sister.
They were a young Jewish couple, weren't they? Your biological parents.
Yeah, I assume, yes. They were from Europe.
Do you know what part?
I can't remember. The social worker told me where my mother was from, and I think it was Austria. I think that was where it was from. Anyway, the interesting story was I was in all these different foster homes, and the social worker would come and just move me from one place to another, so I didn't really think about anything too much. I just took one day at a time and managed to get along okay. I was fine.
Do you remember anything about those homes specifically that you got moved from? Is this in Chicago?
Yes, all of it in Chicago.
Okay.
I remember some of the neighborhoods, and mostly what I would do would be, if something upset me, I would just say, I won't think about that now, and I would just go on with whatever was going on. And that was how I coped. That was my coping mechanism. I'd just say to myself, I'm not going to think about that. And that was how I dealt with the difficulties. But the fun story of that was many years later, after I remembered my one sister very well. She decided she wanted to find me. She was living in California. She had run away from the foster home that she was living with to find our father, who did go to California.
Did she find your father?
She did.
She did.
And she lived with them and worked in his delicatessen. He had a delicatessen.
It all came full circle. Look at that.
Right.
What did she say about him?
She really never talked about him much, but that everything that she attained, she had to get on her own. She was a strong person. She put herself through school, and she was and had a good job. And then after she was married, she married an Israeli guy, really nice fella, and they decided to come to Chicago and try to find me. And at that time, I was in my early 20s, married, had a child, and she came to Chicago and went to the Jewish Children's Bureau that had handled this family case and said that she wanted to find her sister. And they said, well, we closed all those records. You can't do that. Well, they did a sit-in at this office, and they would not leave until they would make a phone call to try to find me. So finally, they called my adopted parents, and luckily my dad was home because he had a brother that he lost contact with, so he knew how she probably felt about trying to find her sister, and he said that it would be okay if we reconnected. But my mother, my adopted mother, was not happy. She felt it was like, what, the past should be the past, and she felt it was a little bit disloyal.
What was that reunion like?
It was awkward. We actually met in the park down near Belmont Harbor. There's a park there, and it just felt awkward, but I did remember my sister. We just hugged. I was not a talker. She was a very outgoing person, and I was more shy. So it was awkward. But after that, we kept in touch for many years, saw each other several times, and that was nice. I really connected to my sister, and I was happy about that. So
that's so cool. What was her name?
Edith. She passed away about 10 years ago. She had liver cancer, I think.
What was the names of your biological parents? What was their first and last names of your brothers and sisters?
Their last name was Weiss, Weiss, and my mother's name was Hannah, but I don't even remember what my father's name was. I'd have to look on the birth certificate. I don't remember. Too many years ago.
That's okay. Do you remember your brothers and sisters' names? Did you ever connect to anyone besides your sister?
The oldest was a brother who I remember once he took me on his bicycle, and I just loved doing that. That was so exciting that he did that. And that was the only time I remember connecting with him as a kid. And then later as an adult, when I was in California, I met him once. My sister took me over there, and our other sister, there was one other sister between Edith and me. Her name was Sylvia, but she died in her teens. We were all living at this foster home, and apparently she was having stomach issues and stuff, and was afraid to tell the foster parents that she was having bleeding issues, and by the time they took her to the hospital, she was very, very ill, and she died. Ulcerated colitis or something, they said it was. So the only thing, the story I remember about that was that everyone going to her funeral, and they left me home with a babysitter, and that was kind of upsetting. I remember that, because that day stuck out in my mind. For some reason, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, but I remember that day so well. When
were you adopted? And by whom?
I was 9 years old when I was adopted.
Was this
prior to that? I was just in different foster homes. Initially, as an infant, I was with one family for 2 years that really wanted to keep me. But when they tried to adopt me, my biological father said no. He was going to get his goal was to get his family back together, and I'm sure he meant well. But whatever happened, it didn't. And then once these people knew they could not legally adopt me, rather than take the chance of having to give me up later, they decided to give me up at that time. So that was how I got into the foster care system. I was 2, and from 2 until 9, I went from place to place, and I was in 6 different places. A lot of it a blur.
So when you were 9 years old?
When I was 9 years old, the social worker that would take me from place to place came and brought me to meet these people, Charlie and Dorothy Bernstein, who came to Chicago from Bloomington, Illinois, where they were living at the time. They were a couple in their 40s who had never been able to have children, and they decided they wanted to adopt a child, and this social worker happened to have been a friend of theirs. I don't know how the connection occurred, but she said, I have a kid that would be perfect for you. And
were you a well-behaved child?
I think so. I never got in any trouble, so I assume. Most of it I don't remember, because until I went to live with Dorothy and Charlie Bernstein, I wouldn't remember anything. I'd just say I'm not going to think about that, and I wouldn't think about anything. So I could make my mind a blank and not be disturbed by anything that was going on around me or moving from one place to another, because it apparently, was too traumatic for me to think about it. So I just say, I'm not going to think about it. And that's what I did.
So you went from Esther Weiss to Esther Bernstein.
Yeah, they did.
And this is in 1944?
Yeah, they didn't actually adopt me. They just did an affidavit to change my name. And that apparently that was legally allowed, so I took their name. I was 9 years old. I was never actually adopted until I was an adult. The Bernsteins were doing their estate planning, and the lawyer told them that unless I was legally theirs, there could be a problem, because they came from big families. And if I wasn't legally theirs, somebody else could contest their will. So I think I was 25 years old, and we did a legal adoption, where I became their legal child.
16 years later, you became their child.
Right.
So tell me about Charlie and Dorothy. Where did they come from? What were they like? They had a business, obviously.
Yeah, they were wonderful people. I was very lucky. My sister, who went to California and struggled, led one kind of life. I led a very privileged and lucky life.
Were they wealthy?
They were well-to-do, had their own business, had a nice home for me to live in. I had my own room. I was living in the lap of luxury. The relationships were interesting. Charlie Bernstein was this warm, affectionate person, and I'd never had anybody that gave me hugs, and that was really nice. My mother, Dorothy, was more aloof, and when she'd get mad at me, she'd holler at me and say she was going to send me back. Well, and that was really upsetting to me. So she and I did not have a great relationship for many years. As adults, we became good friends. And many years later, I remember my close friend saying to me, she really loves you. Look around the house. There's all these pictures of you and everything. Because I never really was sure enough. I think I didn't have an easy ability to trust because of my early beginnings. So anyway, life turned out well for me.
How long did it take you to have a relationship with her? How old were you?
Pretty much did what she told me. I was not a bad kid. I didn't get in trouble. But I never felt sure of her. I don't know how to explain it. She was very bright, very intellectual. I think I felt like I wasn't as smart as she was, and I don't know, I haven't really thought about that for a long time, but it was interesting. But on the surface, we got along, but I never felt sure. I don't know how to explain that.
How can you build a relationship with someone who says, I'm going to send you back when you've been through all that traumatic childhood experience?
Right.
So where did Charlie and Dorothy come from? What European country?
Dorothy was born in the United States. Her three siblings
Do you know what year they were born?
Yeah, she was born in 1903 or 4, something like that. And Charlie was born in Russia in 1897. He came to this country with his parents when he was 3 years old. He was part of a huge family of 9 children. He was working, delivering newspapers from the time he was 6 years old, and always had to work to help support the family. They used to talk about he would talk about the meals that they would have, a gigantic bowl of kasha varnskis, which is a grain with noodles in it and gravy, and that was how they would feed this enormous family because they had very little money. And that was in Chicago. Kasha became a family staple. We would always have that every year to remember those days.
I feel like Kugel's now the new family staple.
Right.
So I remember you. I remember you telling me you were quite the athlete as a child. And you've affectionately earned the nickname Mighty Mouse. Can you tell me about that?
That was at school when shooting baskets. I was really little, but I could make all the baskets in the gym. But from the time I was little, and I remember when I was 9 years old and went to live with the Bernsteins, they had a lot of trees in their yard, and I would love to climb the trees, and I just loved sports from the get-go.
And you're a huge Cubs fan.
Right. And when I was about 10 or 11, my dad took me to an opening game at Cubs Park, and I got to miss school and see the baseball game, and I just loved it. That was an exciting thing, and I'm a Cubs fan to this day.
Smart woman. Thank you. So switch over to 18 years old, because I know you got married very young.
I did.
Who did you marry, and how did you meet this person?
I think because of my background, I needed to connect and have a sense of my own family. My cousin Sylvia, that was Dorothy's sister's daughter, and I were friendly, and she said that she wanted to fix me up on a date with a young man who just got home from Korea. He was a friend of hers that she went to high school with. He was older than I, 7 years older, but a nice guy, and she thought it would be a good fit for us and arranged a date. And they all of them lived on the south side of Chicago. I lived up in the northern suburbs. So my cousin Sylvia invited me to dinner at her house, and she was married at the time and the same age as Sig. I went there and met Sig, and he asked me on a date for the following week.
What was your first impression of him? What did he look like? How did he sound?
He seemed like a nice guy. I mean, I didn't really think about it that much. There was a whole crowd of people at her house for dinner, so it was not a situation where I could really get to know anybody. And I was kind of the stranger in the crowd. Then he came to pick me up and drove all that way from the south side of Chicago to Wilmette, where I lived, and we went on a date. And
where did you go?
We connected romantically right away. Where did we go? I have no idea. I don't even remember. But he used to drive up there every weekend to come see me. And at that time I was a senior in high school, and he was 25 years old and working, at his family business, a printing business.
What kind of printing?
They did printing for the advertising for Walgreens. They were the original company that did Walgreens advertising. And
they were printing their magazines, or?
No, their ads in newspapers and any other kind of publications.
So they were designing it too?
Yes. It was a company called Phoenix Printing. It was started by Sig's father and his brother. Sig's father died in his 50s of leukemia, and the other brother continued the business, and Sig worked for his uncle. That was some interesting stories with that. When he went away to the service, he thought when he came home he'd have a job, so they didn't really still want to include him in the company business. So when he came home, they just had him doing cold calling to try to get new clients, and he was struggling. At that time, that was in the 1950s. My dad, Charlie Bernstein, had some health issues. He was having prostate problems or something, and he wasn't able to work. He asked Sig to come work for him, and Sig said no, he's in his own family business. He wasn't interested in the clothing business.
So I want to talk about the clothing business here in a second, but tell me about your relationship with Sig. So his full name was Siegfried Silberman Jr.?
Yes. The German Jews actually weren't religious. They were more nationalistic. That's what happened during the Hitler era. Was a lot of the Jews didn't want to leave Germany because they felt like they were Germans. And people died when Hitler was taking over all of Europe. It was a sad time.
Did he escape to the U.S. To escape the Holocaust?
I think his parents were well off, and they paid money, and they got on a boat and came to the United States.
Wow.
The details of that I don't know. But anyways, Sig was a junior. The Jewish people, if they're religious, never named their children junior. It was unheard of to name your child unless it was after someone that had just died. But his father was alive, and he wanted his name carried on, so he was Siegfried Silberman Jr. He said until his father died, he was when he was 7 or 8 years old, he was always called Junior. He wasn't called Sig. His name initially was Junior.
What was his mom's name?
Louise.
What was she like?
She was nice. She was a Sephardic Jew. Her background, she was born in the United States, but her father was from Spain, and they left during the Spanish Inquisition when things got bad for Jewish people there. That's how they came to the United States. She was born in the United States, and as was her sister.
Spain.
Right.
This family spans all across that part of the world, I'll call it.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me about, so you met Sig when you were a senior in high school. He's 25 years old.
Right. And he got tired of driving from the south side of Chicago to Wilmette, and he said, let's get married. And I thought, oh, gee, I don't know. I was signed up to go to the University of Colorado. I was supposed to go to college the next year. But I really liked him, and I thought I really wanted to get married and have a family that was mine. And so I said to my dad, Charlie Bernstein, what should I do? I didn't know what to do. And he said, actually, later on I thought he said a selfish thing. He said, get married, I want grandchildren.
How old was he at this time?
He must have been in his 60s.
Was he sick or anything?
No. But he was not real strong physically, I think, because he had worked since he was a little kid, always working to rescue his family.
So at 18 years old, you said, yes, I will marry you.
Right.
What year so you got married? That would be
1954.
54. Where did you get married?
I got married in Evanston, Illinois at the Orrington Hotel. I remember the wedding, and
How was the wedding?
it was beautiful, and it was a scary time for me because I was always very shy and didn't like being the center of attention. Not my thing.
So, you married the love of your life at 18 years old.
I did. And
How was the first year of marriage?
first year of marriage was good. We were happy. We were living in a little apartment on the south side of Chicago, and Sig had 3 sisters that all lived in the area, and his father had died when he was young. But they were a nice family, very nice to me. When I went there to have dinner with them, I liked the camaraderie, the way they were all tease each other and have fun and laugh.
What was Sig like? I know he had a wild sense of humor.
He's a lot like your dad. A Jeffrey kind of humor.
Which is what?
A little bit warped. But he was a good guy, quiet guy, and worked hard. He did, and after the first year of our marriage, Charlie got sick again, and again he asked Sig to come work for the family business, in the clothing business, and Sig said, this time he said okay, because his uncle and his cousins had kind of eased him out of that business. He was working for a different printing company, not the family business any longer. So he was ready to make a change. So Charlie hired him, and he said, you'll learn the business from the bottom up. So we moved to Bloomington, Illinois, where one of our factories was, and he started in the shipping department.
What was the business? Give me an overview.
The business was a clothing manufacturing business called the Woolenware Company. So Sig started working there first, and went from shipping to cutting to sewing to each department for a month to learn how everything worked. Then they moved him finally into the production and the office. And the cute story is that when people would ask Sig, what do you do for a living? He'd say, I'm a son-in-law. Instead of saying what kind of business he was in, he'd say, my job is I'm a son-in-law, because he was still learning the business.
Well, this business has been in our family since 1936, and now it's celebrated, 84 years of business, and my parents now run this. After you ran this business, I mean, it started making peacoats for the Navy for World War II.
Right. Actually, my father, Charlie Bernstein, worked for his uncle originally as a young man, and they made what they called house dresses in those days, which were a simple cotton dress that women wore at home when they were homemakers. And he learned the clothing business from his uncle, and he decided in the 30s to go into his own business, and he borrowed $10,000 and opened a little factory and started making jackets. That was the original product that they manufactured.
And that was the factory in Bloomington, Illinois.
Right.
That's incredible.
So that business was successful. Charlie had all these brothers, and he had his brothers working for him, so it made it possible for them to make a living too. And then when the Second World War broke out, he had government contracts, and as a result, he was able to keep a couple of his brothers out of the service, so they didn't have to go into the war. Because they were making garments for the military. It was a busy time.
So he went into the business with your father, and how did it go? Your father just said, I'm going to pass the business off to you?
They worked together. They worked well together. I'm trying to think what I was doing. I was just being a homemaker at that time because I had 3 little kids. By the time I was 25, I had 3 children. I remember when your mother got married at 25, I said, by the time I was your age, I already had 3 children. It was a different time.
So I want to go back a little bit. So I know Siegfried has a Purple Heart. And
Right.
And can you tell me about his military career? Because I wear his necklace, a mezuzah, every day, and I remember you telling me a story about how it was lucky.
Yes. When my cousin said she wanted me to meet this young man that was had just gotten out of the Korean War, she talked about that he was a decorated soldier, and I later learned what it was all about. He enlisted in the Army and was sent to Korea during that time, and the way he won his medal, I believe they were ordered to climb this hill, and these guys were all getting wounded, and even though he was wounded as well, but not seriously, he was helping his the other soldiers get back to the base where they could get medical help, and that was how he won his award for Bronze Star, which was a Bronze Star for bravery, because he was actually in combat. So he was a good guy that cared about his fellow man.
This feels like something out of Forrest Gump when he gets shot and he's helping all other soldiers return to the base.
Right.
That's what it seems like. Tell me about the mezuzah that I wear.
He always wore that. He just always wore that. I don't think I ever knew him when he didn't have that. I don't know where he got it or who gave it to him. I don't know the background of that.
I remember you telling me a story that he was always questioning why his friends got shot and he wasn't getting shot.
Right. Yeah, he felt like it wasn't because of religion or anything or anybody decreed that they were going to live or die. It was just luck. You had to just be lucky. So years later, when they started the humanistic Jewish congregation, he wanted to be very involved in that, and he was on their board of directors and was very involved with the temple because he liked the philosophy of humanism, of people caring about other people, not so much a theological outlook in life.
So tell me, at 19 years old, you had a special moment. You had your first child.
Right.
Was that planned?
I don't know. I was still at a stage where I didn't think about much of anything except the day that it was. I'm not a person that worries much about the past and dwells on that, or worries too much about the future. I think because of my early childhood, I just kind of take one day at a time, and that philosophy seems to work for me. Not to do too much worrying. So I just had those kids, and life got very busy.
Do you want to talk about your kids? What was motherhood like?
A struggle. I had to grow up with my children. I can remember...
Mark's the oldest.
No, Chuck is
the oldest.
Chuck is the oldest.
Then Mark, and then Gail.
Then 18 months later I had Mark, and then a few years later I had Gail. So those were very busy years. When somebody said, how were your parenting days in the early days? And I'd say it's all a blur. I blocked it out. Lots of diapers.
Any specific stories that come to mind of those 3 wild childs? Because my mom was not a good kid. She got in a lot of trouble. She stole the car.
That was later when she was in high school. When they were small, I remember those days. I can remember looking out the window of our house one time, and it was a spring day, and Chuck and Mark had woken up before I did, went outside, and were making mud pies all over the yard. They were covered head to foot in mud. They were probably fighting. Gail's upbringing, I barely remember. It was all a blur. During her teenage years, it was when we had difficulty because she wanted to do her own thing and I wanted to control her behavior. So,
Gail said you used to be a yeller. Now you're so calm.
I would holler, I guess, when I get upset.
Were you a yeller when you were well, I'm sure those kids probably stressed you out too.
I don't remember. Okay. I honestly do not remember bringing those children up. They somehow grew up.
You plead the fifth. That's just
right.
Fine. That's fine. So going back to the business, it sounds like one where it really took off because it went from, I don't know if Bloomingdale, Illinois was the only factory they had going, but it sounds like at one point they had 4 factories.
They did have more factories, and what would happen, Charlie Bernstein was a great salesman, and he would talk to somebody and take orders for huge quantities of merchandise, and in order to produce it, he'd have to open another factory because he didn't have the space to produce it where he was. So that was how he ended up opening additional factories. So originally they were in Bloomington, Illinois, and then a little town called Georgetown. They converted a bowling alley into a sewing factory. Then later in Frankfort, Indiana, they had a factory. In Chicago, there was a factory on the south side of Chicago.
Didn't they have one in Danville? Does that sound right?
Yes, in Danville, Illinois. I forgot about that. So anyway, they were busy. He built up a very good business, and Sig was working with him. And then when Charlie got sick and passed away, Sig took over the business. And he was running the business.
What year did Charlie pass away?
In 1967. He was 70 years old at the time. He had a heart attack. He just came home. He liked the racetrack. He had gone to the racetrack that day. He came home. He had a good day. He won a couple of the races. He was happy. Actually, your mother was over there She was... I'm trying to think how old she would be, about 8 years old. She was over there visiting, spending the day, and her grandpa said he didn't feel well, and he went to bed and lied down, and he just didn't wake up. He just passed very easily with a heart attack.
Wow. So it was unexpected, though.
Right. And I can remember getting the phone call from my mother saying, "You have to come pick up Gail right away." So Sig and I and the boys, Chuck and Mark, got in the car and went to their house and picked Gail up. So
Sig ran the business at this point. How long had he been working there? This is 1967, so he's probably been working there for 10 years?
About 10 or 11 years at that point, yes. So he knew the business well, and he was ready and well able to take over it.
How, did he continue to grow it? Just maintain it?
Just maintained it. At that time, we had all these contracts with Sears Roebuck and Company, who supplied garments for people all over the country. In those days, all the marketing was done through catalogs. So their merchandise was sold in catalogs. The catalogs were mailed to every farmer in every community all over the country. And they would get an order for one garment. They'd need 100,000 units of that one garment. So they were just mass producing. For Sears, another company called Montgomery Ward's, which has since gone out of business, a company called Spiegel's. These were all what they called catalog mail order companies. And that was the main thrust of what they did.
This is the original e-commerce website, just through print. It was just like, I want that shirt and I'm going to buy it.
Right. But instead of being on the internet, it was in a paper catalog. And that was how everything was sold. I mean, it was the hottest thing on the market was to have a catalog from Sears Roebuck. That was exciting. And you get to see all this merchandise. I mean, we only did the men's outerwear was what we were manufacturing, which was like heavy parkas and jackets for cold weather. And men who worked in the fields or on an electrical line, they had jackets with hoods and stuff. Those came from our factories.
So you were hand stitching these together?
No, they had sewing machines.
Oh, they were just sewing these pieces together.
Singer sewing machines, right. That was what they did.
So you had kids young. You had your third child by the time you were 25.
Right.
So Gail presumably left the house at 40. You were 43. What was your life like at that point? Were you happy? Were you concerned about Sig's health?
I was just overwhelmed with responsibility, and I just lived my life taking one day at a time. I still do that. If you notice, before I go to bed, I look at the calendar, what's on the agenda for tomorrow, because I'm not worrying about it too much. I just kind of, here it comes, another day.
Well, that kind of brings you to your two life lessons that I feel like you have ingrained in us grandchildren and just the people around you. What are those two?
Well, the words of wisdom I always try to pass along is don't sweat the small stuff.
What does that mean to you?
It means don't worry about petty annoyances and upsetting things, because life is more important than that. The people you love, the people you care about, that's what's important. And so don't worry about the little things. And let's see. And if there's something upsetting happening in your life, my mother's line is the one I always like, but that is, this too shall pass, which means that whatever bad that's happening, tomorrow will be better. So always have an optimistic outlook on life.
I love that. That makes me so happy. I think we can all be better at recognizing this too shall pass and don't sweat the small stuff. I think you look at the age of digital media where everyone's opinions, everyone's feelings about something is at your fingertips in your smartphone, and I think a lot of people get caught up in it and don't look at the bigger picture sometimes.
Right.
How have you seen these people evolve? I mean, you've experienced so many different eras of just the American economy, for lack of better terms. I mean, I assume you looked up stuff in the encyclopedia when you were younger.
Right.
Now
it's at your fingertips with Google.
And you're very smartphone savvy. You are.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
You have Snapchat. You have Facebook. You search things up.
I'm trying to get with the modern world, but it's traveling too fast.
What feels different?
I don't know. Just people are not looking at the big picture as much as being entertained to death by their phones and the TV, and everything's visual. With the electronics, I think it's taking too much away from looking at the beauty around you in the world. But I don't know. It's interesting, though. I think I like the artificial intelligence. I mean, there's no end to what the possibilities of what can happen.
As a senior, you've adapted technology. Well, some of them have continued to be what I consider Luddites to a point, which is just technologically adverse.
Right. I know people that don't like it at all. I'm still trying to learn how to use the stuff.
You're doing great. You have an iPad too.
Right. So I enjoy it.
You're doing a great job.
And mostly I love and enjoy my grandchildren and having them come visit and spend a little time with me.
Do you want to talk about your grandchildren? Any stories that come to mind? I mean, you have 8 grandchildren.
I do.
Myself, Adam, John, Eve, and Aaron, which have spent the majority of their life in New York. And then you have Zach, Jason, Laurel, and Emily.
Right. So a big crowd, a new generation there. And they're all young adults now. And I enjoy their friendship. And I feel very fortunate. So that's nice. Do
you want to talk about Harold at all?
Yeah.
Tell me about this guy you met. He's been part of your life for 20 years.
He has.
Who is Harold?
Sig died at 60. He had multiple sclerosis, which one of his sisters also had. And
you took over the business at that point, too.
And
he was sick for many years, too.
Yeah, he had health issues because of that. And once my kids were in high school, I started working in the business more and more every year, so that I learned the business as well. And then as Sig worked less, I worked more. And then in let's see, he died in 1990, I think. But I was already working full-time there. I ended up running the family business. I took night school courses in accounting because I was worried about being able to handle the finances. Actually, when I was first married, I went to business school because I didn't go to the University of Colorado as I had planned and got married instead. I went to Mosier Business College that was in Chicago and took stenography lessons and ended up working for a law firm on LaSalle Street until I started having my kids a year later. So that was my beginning job. So then when I ended up working at Woolenware, when Sig got sick, I thought I really needed more financial background. So that was why I went to night school. So I was working and going to school then.
So the transition to running Woolenware, was it tough?
Not terrible. I just did what I had to. It was a well-run, well-organized business with good systems, not computerized like it is now, and things ran pretty smoothly. And I just did what I had to do, and somehow we survived. During the time Sig was sick, the accountant said we should sell the business, but he didn't want to sell the business. And I just went along with what he felt was what he wanted. And so that was how the business ended up in my lap, because we decided not to sell it and kept it going. And I'm glad that I did. Well, this is a good story about how Gail got into the business. Sig was sick, and Gail was at University of Wisconsin at the Whitewater campus. She still had another year of school, and she said she wants to drop out of school and come to work for the family business. And I said, you absolutely not. No degree, no job. So Gail, who had taken 9-10 hours, was very lazy about getting through school, suddenly took 16 hours of credits and graduated the next season. And we went to her graduation, and she came to work for the family business. At that time, Sig was still working, and I was there. It was an interesting time with a lot of family interaction. Later, after Sig passed away, Gail and I were working together at the family business, and we were not getting along. I would tell her, do this, this, and this, and she would do maybe one of them and say the other wasn't important. So we were not getting along. One day we were in the car going to see some customer, and we had an argument. I was not happy, and she was not happy, so she said, I'm going to quit. And I said, how's now? And that was how she left the business. I don't know if you knew that story.
I did know that story.
Told the family that Gail was no longer working for the family business. And my mother called me. She was still living at the time. She said, you take her back. That's not good. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And my sons said, take her back into the business. I said, nope, she's on her own. So Gail went back to school, got her teaching degree, was teaching school. And
then you eventually let her back into the business.
I did. But that was, I think, first your father, after she was married, after your folks got married, I think, Jeffrey was out, he had worked for this liquor company or something and was out of work, and I needed somebody to help me in the business, and I hired your dad. But your mother was still teaching school at the time. She asked if she could come back into the business, and I told her yes, because she had matured. Instead of being a spoiled kid.
How many years later was that?
That was a lot of years later, because she taught school for several years and had you guys, and I think when you were little, that was when she came back to work. She probably remembers what year it was. I don't.
It doesn't surprise me that she didn't see through the tasks and kind of was a little bit rebellious, to say the least. That seems very on brand for my mom. I love you, Mom, but that seems very appropriate.
The interesting thing was she was wonderful I was more of an inside kind of person, a detail person. She had this ability to interact with people, a lot like someone I'm talking to right now, named Adam.
You must be talking about someone else.
And she could go into a crowded room with business people that she didn't know anyone, and she'd be perfectly comfortable in that environment, unlike me, who was always shy and withdrawn.
Talking about myself anecdotally is I'm seeing a lot of these pieces coming together. I mean, I had no idea Sig's family ran an advertising agency, is what it sounds like. I know you're calling it a printing business, but it sounds like they were creating ads for Walgreens.
They did. They were Walgreens' very first advertising company.
Wow. So they weren't just printing it, they were actually designing.
All of that section of the family, because the business was actually started by Sig's father, who, because he became ill and died early, his brother ended up owning the business, and Sig's cousins, they all became very wealthy from Sig's father's business because they pushed him out of the business.
Wow.
It was interesting.
Wow. But I mean, it's a creative
But now
field.
we've gone full circle with a new advertising agency.
I know. Well,
with my grandson Adam.
You were talking to me about Charles Bernstein, who was incredible with customers. You said he could sell ice to an Eskimo, which I'm not saying I can do, but I feel like I'm very comfortable in meetings with people. I have no idea who they are and they don't know me. And two, just to see, like, it sounds like they're Walgreens' first advertising company. I mean, it was more than printing. Phoenix Printing, you said it was called?
Yes. Actually, the Walgreens asked them to buy stock and to become part of Walgreens, and they turned them down. And I can remember cousin Bob Silberman, who was Sig's first cousin and ended up running that printing company, said that it would have been worth billions of dollars.
Walgreens is doing okay right now.
Yes, because it became such a huge company, but they wanted to stay strictly in the printing business and not go into the retail business.
I'm slowly piecing together. I mean, we have Laurel's artistic talents. I mean, Aaron's an entrepreneur, it sounds like. I mean, Eve has some development abilities. I mean, all this seems kind of around the media department. I mean, this is incredible. John's trying to be an entrepreneur. I mean, you have a lot of these... I'll call it like a Jewish lineage that's encouraging these business ventures or these successful business people, but it's all coming full circle. I mean, I know Jason's doing great in the medical field. Zach's doing... I know he was in the safety world for a while, and he was an upper manager.
Now he's doing artificial intelligence. That's what he's studying in Arizona.
That's a big deal. Emily's going to get her doctorate. So you've got an army, or I should say grandchildren, that are very talented,
very productive.
Yes. So you've done something right.
Right.
There you go. So when you took over the business, and you fired my mom, and Siegfried passed, was life okay? Were you doing all right? I just
somehow took one day at a time, my usual philosophy, and just went to work and did what I had to do, and the business succeeded, actually. We had some bad years when the manufacturing started changing dramatically in the late 1970s. Clothing manufacturing started going offshore to the Far East. We had met with Sears Roebuck, I remember that, and showed them our line of samples for the upcoming season, because we had warehouses where we would manufacture and store their garments for shipment, drop shipping to whatever Sears store anywhere in the country. And we showed them our samples, and then they took our samples and went to the Far East and had them manufactured there. So all of a sudden we were only doing like unusual sizes and smaller orders, and everything started changing. So ultimately, we couldn't afford to keep these warehouses open because there wasn't enough volume of business that there had been in the past. And we decided it was time to just call in the contracts and make them take the garments that we had manufactured for them. And in addition to doing the catalog mail business, we also were manufacturing for a company called a ski wear company, and we were doing a lot of their manufacturing, and with that we were doing customizing to do their logos and so we had one department in our factories where we did embroidery and screen printing to customize these garments. So that ended up becoming the business. Instead of doing all this clothing manufacturing, we were doing less and less manufacturing because that went offshore, and we were doing more and more of the customizing with the logos.
That's incredible.
And that's how the business evolved. And we ended up we closed warehouses, then we closed factories. To this day, we still do some manufacturing. But Gail and Jeff are running the company now.
I see that.
And it's successful because they work hard.
It is successful. Can you believe it? After 80-some years, it's still going strong.
Right.
In all, I mean, you met a guy named Harold. Let's talk about Harold for a little bit, because he's been around your life for 20 years.
Right.
And you spend 6 months a year in Chicago, in Deerfield, Illinois, in a beautiful home. Right. And you spend 6 months a year in Boca Raton, Florida, in Boca West Country Club, which is a very nice place to be.
Right. Senior camp.
It is like senior camp. You golf every day. You have entertainment every night.
Right.
It is spectacular.
Go to concerts, lectures, have a good time. After Sig passed away, I was still quite young. I was in my 50s and a widow. So the whole world was trying to fix me up with different dates. And I met a number of jerks.
They were your jerks. That's what.
Then one day, these mutual friends of ours said, "I've got a guy for you. We want you to meet this man who's recently lost his wife." So they fixed me up with Harold Roden, and that was 21 years ago. We're still together.
What did you think of Harold?
I thought he was a good guy. He was also a self-made man who started a business on his own and was successful.
I see a lot of these commonalities in this
Right.
Jewish religion, or Jewish cult, if you want to call it that. That sounds bad, but
Right.
this Jewish sect of people.
Hard-working, driven people.
Give me a quick recap of the last 21 years of Harold Roden.
I can do it in one word: help. In life, you have to have a good sense of humor. No, we enjoy the same things. We like to travel. We like to go to movies together. We had a lot in common, no question about it. We used to go to Las Vegas all the time, have fun there. We have a good time. We do. We have a lot of laughs.
That's great.
And he has a huge family, and I enjoy his family. They're good to me. He enjoys my family. They're good to him. So it works.
You've experienced so much great stuff over 84 years. When I say stuff, you've had so many experiences, business, family, life, adventures. Do you have any of their life lessons you want to continue to just pass along to make sure the Silberman family, the Croft family, and the world should know?
Just those lines that I had talked about before, just live in the present. The past is something you can't do anything about. Hopefully you learn from it. When you make mistakes, instead of being down about it, think, what did I learn? I think that's really important. And to move forward and just take one day at a time and do the best you can with that day. I mean, that's kind of how I live my life. And I think it's a good philosophy for anyone. Things like anger and resentment, those things are not healthy. So you have to just be optimistic. The jar should be half full, not half empty.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I feel lucky to have you in my life, interviewing me.
This is worth every second, every millisecond.
Maybe you even learned a thing or two about some of my history that you might not have known.
I mean,
I don't think I talk about it much.
You've talked to me. I've heard "This Too Shall Pass" and "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff" through my childhood, and I need to be a better user of those messages. I feel like I have gone back to it, though, in times of when I do need to just kind of reset. I think the most surprising part is just watching these family ventures come together for me. I mean, right now I'm in just a pure business mindset, just kind of because I'm growing my own business. Right. And so it feels very close to me that my family's been part of these various ventures and businesses since the 1930s. And in different businesses and ventures since the 1930s. And I'm so proud of everything that my heritage has done and put together. I'm so proud of where I've come from, and I attribute a lot of, probably, I'd say, all my success to my upbringing. I mean, I learned how to persevere in a harsh environment, growing up in my home. Love my parents, but it was different, and I've learned to persevere and learn how to ask for a sale from Harold, you, my family. I've learned so much from you, so I appreciate every second of it. I really do.
Yeah, well, I feel lucky to have you in my life. It means a lot. That when you pick up the phone and call me, it makes my day. I want you to know that.
I'll do that more often.
No, you do it pretty good. That's nice. I love hearing from you.
Hey, thank you, Grandma. I love you, and thank you so much for doing this with me.
You're welcome.
Love you.
My pleasure.